All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Darish. Joining me from Canada, he's a contributor at Issue Hawk and a staff writer at Latest.com from Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a military vet and Latest.com senior political analyst from Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the State Department and the author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. Well, it's a good day because everyone's favorite hockey mom is back in the news. Sarah Palin yesterday endorsed Donald Trump in Iowa, traveling with him today. Josh, what do you make of this unholy alliance? And do you think it'll actually help him in places like Iowa when he's in a really tight race with Ted Cruz right now?
I mean, I would have to say that the Venn diagram of Donald Trump supporters and Sarah Palin supporters are what the rest of us would like to call just a circle. So I don't think it's going to get him any more support than it didn't. I actually think it was a point Meghan McCain made in her response that it's more Palin hitching her wagon to Trump's rising star than the other way around. She is sort of a beloved conservative figure, but she really hasn't been relevant even to them for a very long time. So her coming out to endorse Trump, it makes sense if you think about it, though it is it's pretty shocking that even though John McCain has never once criticized her, she decided to endorse the guy who said he wasn't a war hero and was a loser. So
yeah, it was
that's a little stunning.
Yeah, to your point, that's a good point. It's a bizarre thing. They made it out to be this big thing, but she hasn't been seen in public in over 6 months. So, Eric?
Well, I think the thing that's most surprising is just that she's kind of responsible for us knowing who Ted Cruz is. She was still very hot when Cruz wasn't anybody yet. She kind of built him up, so it almost seemed natural that they would be, she'd endorse him. And her jumping ship to Trump, especially when Cruz is starting to gain, is also really fucking weird.
It's pretty ironic, the monster that John McCain created, that his wing of the establishment wing of the party now has to battle with. I know we're a long way from a Trump nomination, but Eric, at what point does Trump have to start wondering if maybe these things he's saying and palling around with people like Sarah Palin is going to severely undercut any chance he may have had in the general election?
I don't think it's going to, because I think by this point we would have seen some kind of backlash from his comments. But, speaking on the whole Palin-Trump kind of duo, whatever he chooses for her in his administration, we don't know yet. But I think it's the perfect alliance of, those Republican baffling idiots. They're both hypocrites that, we can't deny. Everything Palin says is a quote that you can put on some news bit. Same can be said about Trump. She knows very little about policy, and so does Trump. He knows very little. But I think it's like just the perfect laughing stock for the Republicans to roll with as a Democrat, because now we can sit here saying, well, if it's a Trump-Palin nomination, we have a great chance of winning, even if it's Hillary, because as much as people may hate Hillary Clinton, I don't think anybody wants to see Sarah Palin in a position of power where she can possibly push the button to destroy the world.
No, certainly not. Well, the Palin endorsement came a day after Trump gave a speech at Jerry Falwell's Liberty University, where he quoted from 2 Corinthians. He's trying hard to pander to the evangelical vote. What do you think, Peter? Does he have a chance to win over those on the religious right, even though he doesn't have anywhere near the same credentials as someone like Huckabee or Santorum?
There's if you guys ever saw the movie, The First Airplane, there's a character in there that keeps interrupting himself and saying, this is a terrible day for me to quit sniffing glue. This is a terrible day for me to stop drinking. And that's exactly how I feel. I mean, we're really through the looking glass here, people. You've got Meghan McCain, who knows nothing about anything, now in the national news again. You've got Sarah Palin, who knows nothing about anything and is essentially sort of a walking piece of performance art, and she's back in the news. And then Donald Trump, who's just a general ass clown. The fact that Trump is at Liberty University begging for those votes just adds to the entertainment value of all this, but it's also terrifying. There was a survey taken soon after that where a number of people felt that somehow Martin Luther King had endorsed Donald Trump.
Because of the Jimmy Kimmel bit, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know what to say. I mean, to say that Trump is going to have to share the evangelical vote with others? Maybe. I mean, maybe Trump will simply claim that he can walk on water and perform miracles and scoop up the whole evangelical vote. One of the things those guys like to do, and we'll see if Trump is actually clever enough. Huckabee is a master at this. A lot of hardcore evangelicals believe that we are in end of days. The end of time when Jesus will come back to earth and everyone will come back to life and whatever that says in the Bible. I don't recall all the details, but the world ends. And there's lots of clues in there. And if you go online and look at some of the evangelical websites, they're all full of speculation. I mean, anytime there's a fight in the Middle East, it's Gog and Agog, and the world is going to end. Huckabee drops funny little semi-veiled coded references to this kind of thing all the time. If Trump's people are smart enough to pick up on all this, he may start doing it too. And at that point, it's easy to imagine a large portion of the evangelical vote going there. Since Huckabee won't be the nominee, he can also gather that vote for himself and then throw his support to either Trump or Cruz as one of them becomes the nominee. It's the whole thing is just really, I hate to overuse the word insane, but it's insane.
It's a pretty apropos term, yeah. Josh,
yeah, go
ahead.
I was just going to say to the question about whether Trump can get evangelical support, there is one thing to sort of consider about the religious folk in general is that, as much as they love you, if you've been pious and with them from the beginning, they really love a convert. So, if you're Rick Santorum, you've been a good Catholic boy your whole life. Take a pic, get one topless picture sent to your cell phone. It leaks to the news. You are now a fraud forever. Donald Trump, you're out there, cutting people's heads off and whoring around, doing drugs, and all of a sudden you've come to the light and praise Jesus. And that could play. Like if he can't keep fucking up though with like saying that his favorite Bible verse is too personal instead of just coming out with some like they do, like it's bingo numbers. Peter's right. If he starts speaking their language, he'll be able to play it. But I honestly think he's too careless to put that much work in.
Well, at least he didn't pull a Sarah Palin and say that his favorite Bible verse is all of them. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Sarah Palin, I wanted to raise that point because Trump, knowing that he really doesn't know jack shit about the Bible or about these evangelical people, fine, he sends out his surrogates. And Sarah Palin is a perfect one. Despite her inbred family and their bizarre, illegal, or out-of-wedlock babies, she's still a favorite of the evangelical side. And so Trump can back off, let her speak for him, and or gather up someone else to do it, and then he doesn't have to learn any Bible verses. Someone else will speak on his behalf. We've seen that before, too.
Josh, you had an interesting post this week about Donald Trump supporters, and they all share one trait. What trait is that?
Well, it makes sense, if on the surface, it's that they all love an authoritarian kind of leader. Now, most political polls don't check for this, but this one guy, Matthew McAllister, he did a poll where he asked the respondents a series of questions about child rearing. And based upon those answers, like if they want the child to be obedient, respectful, follow the children should follow the rules as they're told, not question things. It reveals that you like authoritarian leadership. And, naturally this is just one poll, but if this continues to be the case, it suggests that his support isn't even capped yet. Because there are, more than half of moderates respond to authoritarianism, around 17% of Democrats that responded to the survey respond to authoritarianism. So that means that in a general, he could, using his talent that no other politician has, which is to completely absolve himself of what he said 10 seconds ago without apologizing or seeming like a fraud, could pull in those people on more moderate positions if he gets the nomination. In a sense, or just to sum it up, Trump is way scarier than any of us thought.
Well, Eric, you write for Presidential Polls, our little sister site. What do you think? There have been polls that say that as many as 20% of Democrats would convert to vote for Trump. Do you think that there's any realistic chance of that happening?
It depends how serious he gets and if he can show us that he is a legitimate politician. He has to get past the one-liners and the stupidity, and I don't know if that's possible for him. But if it is, I do think that you would see some Democrats jump over to Trump if Clinton becomes the nominee for them. Because a lot of Americans just don't want Clinton in. They're fed up with everything she represents. She's a do-nothing politician. She's extremely fake and genuine. Now, if Bernie Sanders were to be the nominee, I think then you would see very little jump over to Trump unless they're still scared of that false socialist.
I got to challenge that, Eric, because there are moderate Democrats who are scared to death of Bernie Sanders.
Yes, but it's because he hasn't been.
And older moderates that's Trump's fucking wheelhouse.
Yes, but it's because Bernie Sanders hasn't been made palatable to the public yet. Once he's the sole focus of a campaign, then we'll start to really see the real Sanders. Right now, he's got to kind of throw out the extreme left-wing things like free education, free healthcare, just to get the nomination. And that's a problem with the American political system. It's the way we...
Oh.
No, but it really is, because you spend so much money just choosing a nominee, then to go into another general election against the opposite party. It's just a lot of wasted time, and frankly, we should just...
I can't disagree.
The thing about moderates crossing over, an awful lot of strange things happen when people get alone in those voting booths. And one of the motivations that is so effective is fear. We remember Ronald Reagan beating Jimmy Carter back in, 1980, 1982, basically by sparking... 81, yes, sorry. Basically by scaring everyone. The Russians are coming and this and that, and the economies are, and people got scared, and Carter lost quite badly. The thing is that both, assuming it's Trump versus Clinton, both of them have a big fear card to play. Hillary is already experimenting with a meme, which is basically vote for me so you don't get Trump. And obviously Trump has been evilly brilliant about exploiting America's fears of terrorism and a weak president in the White House. So how those fear votes play out, I think, will speak a lot to moderates and undecided people which way they're going to go.
Peter, let's not forget, appealing to the fear vote, that's Hillary's wheelhouse, man. You remember the 3 a.m. phone call ad back from 2008? There was like a devastating, it was like an oh snap moment because, it was basically as much of a daisy ad as, the nuclear ad that you'd get with a Democrat candidate. Yeah, but she could play that game, so.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, fair enough, yeah.
I think they're both going to be playing those cards. We'll see who does it. But, I mean, the thing that's in Trump's favor would be, God help us, another terrorist action, even something on a scale like San Bernardino, which is, with all respect, 14 people. I mean, it's like 20 minutes of random gunfire in America. But that plays to Trump. World events can play to Trump. Anything that makes the United States look weak in the minds of conservatives plays to Trump. I think he has a lot more fear cards that he can play on. Plus, he is, I'm not trying to make a pun, I mean, he's fearless about doing it. Hillary is always parsing her words and thinking them through and leaving a little wiggle room. Trump will come out right out and say, if you elect Hillary, the Iranians are gonna kick our butts, and he'll have no shame or hesitation to do that.
That's what I was going to say, was that Trump is not afraid to say outrageous things, whereas Clinton is very careful. And if it is head-to-head between those two, then if Trump can cater to that vote, he will, whereas Clinton won't, which is scary.
I want to get to the debate in a minute, but Peter mentioned the electability issue, and the Clinton camp has gone on the offensive this week since the debate. Just today you had Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill, Missouri Governor Jay Nixon attack Bernie Sanders as a socialist and out of the mainstream. Do you think that the fact that they're pushing the electability issue so hard, Peter, represents the fact they feel that they kind of lost the issue debate?
Well, they've had some trouble with the issue debate. I mean, if Sanders would wake up and push the right buttons, they'd even be in worse shape. We'll get to the debate, of course, but, he had her on the ropes talking about money from Wall Street and then let her go. But the electability question, which Hillary has been pushing, could easily take a pretty serious body blow if Bernie beats her in Iowa and then beats her in New Hampshire. I mean, at that point, she's going to have to say, well, I am still more electable, and if you guys just wait around long enough, maybe I'll be able to prove that to you. So she's going to have to walk very softly. One of the things that's plagued her from the beginning is these expectations that she was just going to have a straight walk into the nomination. And Americans do love their underdogs. So we'll see what Bernie can come up with. But a win in Iowa in about, 10 days, will certainly chip away at the Hillary armor.
And let's not forget that Bernie Sanders just clobbered her in a CNN poll in New Hampshire as well. It was 60-33. Yeah, so, I mean, that's momentum right there. If he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, who knows?
I think that what can happen is they can split New Hampshire and Iowa, but unless Hillary Clinton embarrassingly beats him in South Carolina, I'm talking by 20 points, maybe 15 at the least, that will, again, it'll perfectly mirror 2008 and being like, oh shit, this is a race. The argument against Sanders is that Hillary's going to get those South Carolina Democrats who are not the same as your liberal Iowans or your rural New Hampshire type Democrats, which coming from Vermont, that's, where Bernie lives. Frankly, I never understood why Bernie Sanders wasn't considered a favorite in New Hampshire, like why he shouldn't have to have pressure to deliver that state, because it's Vermont. It's right there. It's essentially his backyard.
Yeah,
so I think if Hillary can take
higher there for a long time.
Yeah.
True, but yeah, I mean that the poll. It's funny because the polling was astronomical. Like I think Hillary might have blown the biggest lead ever in recorded sort of politics. From that far out. I don't know.
Not official.
Right. Well, no, I know it was even higher support this time because like all the Obama people were ready to pay the death tax. They're like, we're all for Hillary this time. And then Bernie started talking. So I don't know. I think that South Carolina and New Hampshire are very important for Hillary, though Iowa has successfully predicted the nominee, I think, since Gore?
Yeah,
it's a good track record there.
On the Democratic side.
Yeah,
of course.
Eric, did you want to jump in?
Well, I was going to say, because you were saying why was Clinton, why didn't Sanders automatically have New Hampshire? I would argue it's just the bandwagon effect. Everybody wants to pick the winner right off the bat, and Hillary Clinton seemed like the obvious choice for a long time. And once people got to know Sanders, then they realized, okay, this guy has much better values and would probably serve us a lot better than Clinton ever would.
Yep. Well, we had the final debate before the both Iowa and New Hampshire. The next one will be after the New Hampshire vote. So, all eyes are on Bernie Sanders. And what do you think, Eric? Did Bernie perform well enough in the final debate before the caucus and the primary to really give himself a chance in an early state sweep?
I think he performed very well because for most of the debate he was just on the defensive, but he handled it well. He parried off Clinton's attacks, made her look petty. He had the debate moment where he did that side eye towards her when she made a really stupid comment. And I think, that Sanders did as well as he needed to. Definitely much better than the previous debate where he came out a little more flat. By making Clinton look so aggressive, it'll play into his advantage when he can come out and show that he's genuine and not a candidate that's just looking to constantly be on the attack and discredit the other person.
Peter, do you think that Bernie helped himself enough, or does it even matter heading into these first two contests?
I was a little concerned about Bernie's performance. And I'll quickly mention that, he wasn't helped at all by the moderators who appeared to be so deep in the tank for Hillary. But, Bernie had so many strong points that he didn't seem to pursue. I mentioned earlier about the money that Hillary is pulling in from Wall Street and from large corporations. That's Bernie's thing. He's funding himself without super PACs, with all these small donations. I mean, if I were his advisor, I would have just said, never let that go. Just keep bringing that up, keep pounding on her, because she can't say anything. There's no response she has to that. But he let it slip, and he let her sort of say something about Dodd-Frank, yada, 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 yada. The same thing with the gun control thing. He should have come out swinging on that. Even coming back and saying, you had a chance to do something about gun control in Iraq, didn't you, Hillary? Or something clever to just put that issue away. And lastly, healthcare. He really let her score points on him, and she had nothing. I mean, in poker terms, she had, a pair of twos. And Bernie allowed her to twist and turn the fact that he issued some statement about healthcare just before the debate. He allowed her to get away with playing word games about single payer and what those things all mean, and simply saying, check my website for my positions on these things is deadly. I mean, that's so boring. It's unbelievable. So I was a little disappointed in Bernie. I expected more from him. I think he conceded too many points to Clinton. On the other hand, Eric's statement is correct. Hillary looked loud and shrill, and that can't be good. But which one is going to really persuade voters? I don't know.
We should take a bathroom break this time.
Yeah, Josh, what do you think? Did he blow an opportunity to really drive it home before the first two states?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree respectfully with my two esteemed colleagues here. I think, well, not so much with Peter and vis-a-vis Bernie's performance, but about Hillary. I think she creamed him. I mean, she clearly won that debate, which I think is ironic because not many people were watching because it was, coming from the back of a minivan with a mobile Wi-Fi connection, apparently. Like, it was Sunday night, no one was watching. I mean, I guess 10 million people watched it, but
online plus the YouTube, it was about 14 million, which is about as good as they can expect without Donald Trump in the race.
I guess maybe that argument doesn't hold water, but it felt like it was a stupid, weird time to have a political debate. That said, Hillary did just what she normally does. I remember when she first started debating Obama like he was a serious contender, she hit him hard. There was no more politeness and more direct criticism, and she did that. And, I mean, if she did come off shrill or whatever, that's just because I guess people see Hillary Clinton talking like a politician as being shrill. And, I mean, that's maybe just her personal celebrity baggage. But I think on the issues, Peter's right in that Bernie did not push back nearly hard enough. I mean, one of the things that's great about him is that he's so consistent all the time. And no matter what is going on around politically, he is going to stick to the message, and he's going to tell you that he wants to, fix the system, and he's going to tell you to come to the website, and he's going to tell you that, we can win. That is what he says every time he speaks. And that is good, except when in a debate like that, he should have adapted sort of how he approached those subjects and those topics and maybe engaged a little more directly and stopped worrying about looking like the politest guy in the room. I don't know. I really think that it all comes down to the ground game in the elections. So if he did the work in Iowa and New Hampshire and the polls are reflecting that accurately, then he should do well. But he was not helped by the debate.
Right before the debate, Bernie Sanders released a detailed healthcare plan that pretty much lays out how it all works. Were you surprised he didn't push that a little harder then and also in the 3 days since? Josh?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was a weird. He was on the Sunday shows that morning, so I don't understand why he wouldn't have had the plan ready to talk about. Because, I'm sure it could have been leaked to the producers Saturday night. They would have discussed it, had a policy discussion. Instead, he ended up fielding just Hillary Clinton's words thrown back at him from the anchors and saying, "Well, we're going to post the plan today. We're going to post the plan today," and it looked bad. I mean, again. looking at it rationally, of course, he was just, taking his time to make sure a huge policy document was correct before releasing it to the world. But given the sort of context of the situation, he was ducking and dodging on the Sunday shows, and even the most people who aren't politically aware know that that's not a good thing. So again, I think he bungled that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch these last 10 days until Iowa. Well, last week, the U.S. got its 10 sailors back from Iran, and we were talking about how there's still all these Americans
USA.
there. And literally like a day later, they went and got them back. And I'm not saying we had anything to do with it, but Peter, why now?
Well, that's the magic question. I mean, why did any of this happen right now? We can assume, for example, that the release of those 5 Americans who had been held in jail had been worked out along the swap, I guess, had been worked out a long time ago, and they just kept it under wraps for a while. But this thing with the sailors remains a mystery. The mainstream media seems to have, been done with it a long time ago, and so I doubt we're ever going to really learn much about it. But as I've written on Latest.com, there are huge unanswered questions that are going to make great history someday. The U.S. government, like they did with bin Laden, like they did with the Afghan hospital, came out with one story, and when nobody bought that, they came out with another story. And just today, the U.S. government has come up with a sort of hybrid story that combines the first one, which is mechanical failures, which made no sense. I mean, there's 2 boats. Did they both simultaneously fail? Why didn't one tow the other one out? Then this sort of generic misnavigation thing without really discussing how that happens in an age of GPS in some of the world's most volatile waters. They just left all this hanging. We did a few rounds of USA, and we blame the Iranians in some ways for being too aggressive, and it was just a mistake. Nobody explained why the boats didn't call for help. Why the Navy wasn't watching this all on radar and sent somebody out there. There's just question after question after question that has no answer, and apparently is just going to be left to drop because the Iranians released them quick enough. It's very unfortunate because it speaks to, I think, the underlying questions. I mean, who's in charge in Iran? What is the role of the Revolutionary Guards, who tend to represent the theocracy, versus the secular government, who in fact cut the nuclear deal with the United States? I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I don't think that's kind of way out there, because there's not been put forward any good theory, anything that holds up to even casual questioning. And until someone does, I don't think we can call anything an outlier or a conspiracy.
Well, Josh, Peter was skeptical last week. He said it was probably just a fuck-up. Do you think it was just bungled by the Navy?
I mean, and I've been looking at it more skeptically since then because, Peter was right. I really, like I said, it felt right to me that, this could be a huge fuck-up. And I still haven't seen any convincing evidence to suggest that it isn't. And it's just like they are definitely being cagey, but I think it's more out of embarrassment than anything more secretive or nefarious than that. Just because the Navy, their answers about why they lost contact, why they dropped the boats dropped off GPS was so vague as to literally mean nothing, which. I would think if there was something there, they wouldn't have done that. I mean, I don't know. I am less. I think it's less likely that it was something like Peter is suggesting, but it's certainly possible that it is maybe they were going to sneak in and check on something. Some kind of stupid recon mission, and a fuck up did occur, And in that case, I will say I was correct.
I hope there's not a SEAL team stranded on Farsi Island right now waiting for a ride home. That would be bad. The sailors have disappeared.
That would be bad.
The American sailors have disappeared. We saw more of them on Iranian television than we have on any American media outlet. They've supposedly been taken to Qatar or someplace for debriefing and health checks and, PT. I mean, they were in captivity, 15 hours? I don't think this is not quite like they were brainwashed in North Korea. We haven't heard a word from them. They weren't paraded around as American heroes or anything like that. They just fell off the earth.
One Republican politician was calling for the main one to be court-martialed for his
the one that apologized in the video.
Yeah.
No, of course. But, it's so embarrassing that people would even say something like that.
Well, Josh, why do you think that is? Why has there been, and it's not just that one guy, there's been some vitriol towards the actual sailors that were taken into captivity.
Well, it is the natural byproduct of the way that the Republican presidential candidates have chose to discuss this issue. It's naturally a big hit to or a loss in terms of the horse race with the Iran deal being announced, and not uncoincidentally the announcement of the prisoner swap the day that Iran enters compliance. I mean, that was obviously a staged sort of media event and middle finger to the Republican candidates who were 3 months ago saying the name of every hostage and saying, how could we have the deal without this swap? How could, without these prisoners, how could you do that? This was, I think, a fun little FU to them. So what they did was they have to make this seem like these soldiers were humiliated, embarrassed, and then taken into captivity by a hostile regime, and in filming the video, violating the soldier code of conduct that talks about being in captivity. And, they wanted him to be like, name, rank, serial number, vote Trump. Like, that's what they wanted. That would have been the hero they would have seen the movie about. This guy who just said, hey, we're sorry, and I can't wait to get home, because if I say this, I can go home. They're like, that's cowardice. And
he missed the chance of being played by Bradley Cooper in the movie version of all this. It was
right.
Totally, but I could see him with the Trump cap there in Iran. That was
Well, while we're in the neighborhood, let's stop by Iraq and Syria. Talk about ISIS here often. Got a column in the Huffington Post this week that you called "You Won't Like It, but Here's the Answer to ISIS." Peter, why is the U.S. and the West failing against ISIS, and what do you think will work?
Well, first of all, we have to agree that the evidence is that the things we have been doing for 14 some years in the so-called war on terror have failed. There still is a war on terror going on. Along the way, of course, we've set fire to how many countries and things like that, and we've watched one international terror group, Al-Qaeda, fade away, and another one, ISIS, sort of pop up to replace them. So it's important to understand this hasn't worked in whatever we set out to do. The next piece that I think is important to understand is how little terrorism there actually is directed against American citizens, certainly American citizens here in the United States. There's lots of ways to count this, but I cited a source that suggested it's about 38 Americans that have lost their lives to Islamic terrorism since 9/11. Whatever, double it, triple it, quadruple it, pick a different number, whatever you like to do. You just can't get that number up very high. And particularly when you start comparing it against other causes of death in the United States, certainly gunshots that we've talked about here, drunk drivers, pick your favorite disease, whatever. But we don't spend trillions of dollars trying to fix any of those things, and we certainly don't invade other countries. My argument is that there are two things that the United States can do and thus should do. The first, of course, is a very practical one, and that is cut off the funding for ISIS. We know that ISIS makes an awful lot of its money selling oil and selling off antiquities. All that stuff has to get out of the Middle East. It's big, it's heavy. In the case of oil, it's a huge deal to do that. You've got to pull it out of the ground. You've got to do some kind of refining or processing. You've got to put it on trucks, pipelines, ships, whatever. The United States needs to stop that, and needs to stop it in a comprehensive way, not just a few for show, blow up a couple of oil wells or something. Put a stop to it, and it's going to mean stepping on toes. A lot of the oil apparently flows through Turkey in one form or the other. Turkey is a nominal ally of the United States. There's information to suggest some of the oil is being bought by Israel, but somebody's buying it, and somebody is doing all the work with it, and we need to stop that. Same thing with the funding that comes out of the Sunni countries in the Gulf, particularly Saudi Arabia and to a lesser extent Qatar. This has been going on for a long time. The Saudis have always funded these groups ostensibly through private donations from, concerned Saudi citizens. Well, whatever. The money has to stop flowing, and the U.S. needs to address that one way or the other. If ISIS doesn't have money, their ability to do bad things drops off considerably. And then after that, and this is perhaps the more controversial part, we need to go home. We need to get out of the Middle East. We need to stop mucking around in civil wars where we always will come out the loser. There's no question about this. We have a long history of screwing this up, right back into Vietnam and other places. The fact that we intercede on one side automatically makes that side unpopular with the people. We do more harm than good. Certainly in Iraq, we keep finding new ways to put good weapons into the hands of ISIS by supplying them to our Iraqi allies who immediately abandon them on the battlefields and things like that. Get out. Go home. Stop giving ISIS the greatest recruiting tool in the world. The Americans are occupying the Middle East. It's a war against Islam. Stop propping up crappy governments like in Iraq. Stop helping one group that's supposedly fighting ISIS. But, if you defeat ISIS, for example, militarily in Syria, well, who takes over? Well, it's very likely al-Nusra, who's an al-Qaeda-oriented group, is going to do that. We can't do this. We're not good at it. We have a bad track record, so get out. We can contain ISIS and other forms of terrorism outside the United States. If the Europeans want to fight a war of their own, more power to them. They got guns and bullets to do that too. But setting the Mideast on fire has not worked, and it's time to try something different. So those are my ideas thrown into the mix.
It's fascinating. Josh earlier said that Hillary and Trump are stronger on the Middle East and ISIS than Bernie Sanders. And there was a poll that Eric alluded to also that had Bernie up by a lot in New Hampshire. And one of the things, on the economy, he crushed Hillary among the voters. On honesty, he crushed her among the voters. But when it came to ISIS, the overwhelming majority of voters who do want to vote for Sanders said that Hillary is a better choice to defeat ISIS, whatever that means. Josh, why do you think that this is how the narrative has gone, that they're stronger on ISIS and he's weaker just because his plan is more in line with what Peter suggested?
Well, here's the thing. When I read Peter's article, I was like, of course, this is the argument that comes from someone who was a diplomat, because me, as someone who was a soldier, knows that that's like the exact wrong thing to ask sort of the military to do, which is to say, like, don't let anything past here, and that's it. Every soldier hates that. That is what Desert Shield was, and it was miserable and silly. But it's also exactly right. So the perception that they're stronger on ISIS is that people want to feel like, that there is someone who is actively protecting them from these shadowy bad guys who they don't really understand. And so that's why when President Obama, as controversial as it has been, just running drone strike after drone strike after drone strike, it hasn't really worked, but in terms of keeping people comforted, but it has sort of worked in sowing the type of fear reputation that Trump talks about and that Hillary alludes to. in sort of what he's doing the wrong thing or the taking the wrong path in a way that is more politically palatable to the people at home than what Peter is suggesting. So why people are more comforted by the thought of endless war and more death and more money, I don't know. I guess that's just what we like, a good battle. But, Peter makes a hell of an argument, and I think that it is exactly right.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I think part of the issue is that we have had politicians from the highest office all the way down to local people fanning the flames, terrifying American citizens now for 14 or 15 years. No one wants to talk about the realities of these things. Everyone wants to be afraid. There's a brown guy on my airplane. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. People with hijabs are in my neighborhood. They must be terrorists. You can't do that as consistently as the government has, and with as much help as the media is happy to provide them, and then expect Americans to kind of react rationally to these threats. Even in the debate the other night, and certainly in the Republican debates, I kept hearing the phrase, what are we going to do about ISIS? Or what do we know about ISIS? Well, most of us don't know crap, and almost all of us are not going to do anything about ISIS. I mean, Josh was referring to the soldiers. So I feel bad for those men and women, because they're being sent out on a mission that has no definable endpoint, that has no clear purpose. And oftentimes, I suspect they're much more afraid about the Iraqis and the Syrians behind them that we're supposed to be working with than they are about ISIS in front of them. I mean, at least they kind of can figure out which way the bullets are flying if they're coming at us. But the so-called blue on green attacks, I suspect, are more dangerous to many of them than anything else. But again, once you scare the hell out of people, especially over a generation, it's surprising that they would react any differently than they are.
Well, and I would add too, recently, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Marco Rubio came out saying that he bought a gun to combat ISIS at home. And it's rhetoric like that, though, that makes people scared into believing that something is actually happening at home. But another question I was going to ask relating to this topic, so we talk about ISIS as a threat and how we should pull out, which I agree with. I wonder if the national debt ever becomes something that affects daily Americans, if then we'll start to really consider cutting the budget and saving money on these pointless wars. Because right now, the national debt's just a number nobody gives a shit about because it's not affecting them really. But when it starts to actually be a choice, like, okay, do we provide healthcare to citizens or fund a war? Will people then start to care more? I don't know. I hope so.
Well, but wait, we don't fund healthcare for citizens. We have crumbling infrastructure. Our schools and our roads are falling apart. Our college tuitions are the highest. I mean, in fact, it does affect us. We're just too goddamn stupid to notice it. The president bragged.
Not on like a state of emergency kind of level yet.
No, I understand that. But, the president in State of the Union just bragged about the fact that we spend
whole area.
Yeah, I mean, look at Detroit. Look at Flint, Michigan.
Flint, Michigan, yeah, it's awful right now.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I mean,
Michigan is a failed state.
Yeah, it's a failed state, right? And we don't seem to be noticing these things, or we don't look at them in any kind of comprehensive way. People don't understand. I mean, if we pulled, handfuls of things out of the military budget, we're spending $11 million or more a day in the Iraq-Syria war. Think about what schools could do with $11 million. Think about what you can build with that. And this is every day. Never mind the manpower and the women power that are expended in the military that certainly could be used in other places, some kind of civilian construction course, or just simply hiring real construction workers to do this. So we are getting chewed up by our military obsessions. We're just too dumb to realize it.
I want to talk about Flint in a second, but Josh, I remember when George Bush left, his approval was in the teens. He was called a war criminal by the left. And now Obama, 7 years later, is pretty much carrying on the same policies. And now, even in Democratic primary polls, continuing those same Bush strategies on combating terror in the Middle East has now become being strong on terror. How has that happened, especially on the left?
Because no one knows how to fix it. Like, no one has an answer. I mean, the one thing that I can't help but keep noticing is that no matter who they ask, whether it's Lindsey Graham or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, with the sole exception of Rand Paul, they all say the same thing about what needs to be done. Very few people say that we need to put American boots on the ground. And of course they mean enforce, because there's already thousands of Americans over there right now. The other thing that they say that they want to do is, keep up an air campaign, maybe create a no-fly zone. But that's more of a pissing contest between, like, Russia and the United States than anything that's happening in the country. The other thing that they say, and even Bernie Sanders says this, is that the ground war does need to be fought, but it needs to be fought with Muslim troops. And the problem with that, which is sort of where another reason where I think Peter's idea is kind of a stroke of genius. I guess it happens to everyone, buddy. The reason that it's but is that, Saudi Arabia, even our good friend King Jordan, or King Hussein in Jordan, they're seen as not good people. They are not, they may not be at Assad level awful, but to the people in their countries, it is just another dictator. So there is no, like, Muslim army that can fight this war, because it's either the army of the dictators or the army of the death cult. And at least the death cult has heaven.
I was going to say, we need to stop saying that all Muslims are some giant brotherhood that are going to unite for a cause. It's not true. There's individual cultures within it that absolutely hate each other.
I mean, the other thing is that, why are we the only ones who seem to recognize that there needs to be some kind of Muslim army? I mean, you would think, since ISIS and all these other naughty things are happening across, a stone's throw across the border to places like Saudi Arabia or Jordan, that they might have noticed it too. But it just seems like it's always the United States who wants to put together a coalition, and who wants to unite the Arabs in these campaigns. The Arabs don't seem to be particularly interested in it, and they don't seem to feel particularly threatened by it, or they might want to do something about it. This is just another fantasy. We want to figure out some way to do this without the so-called large boots on the ground. We know that air power by itself is not effective, and so we keep waiting for, to mix things up. I mean, the Great White Hope to show up, and, divisions of Saudis to cross the border or anything along those lines. It isn't going to happen. They don't see this the way we see it, and they're never going to band together and fight for something that America alone apparently sees as particularly important. Pick all these groups that are being genocidally slaughtered that we keep trying to save. Again, it's only us who seem to recognize these issues, and don't give me that crap, not you guys, but I mean, the crap of, well, only America has the power and the moral support, superiority to go in there and rescue the Syrians or the Yazidis or the Christians here or that. I mean, come on. Other people notice these things too. I mean, it's in the news. But yet it's only the United States who keeps using these things as little triggers to insert ourselves into other people's wars. But that's
because we declared 16 years ago that we're going to war with everyone who's a terrorist. So we kind of like insinuated ourselves in this discussion, because again, terrorism takes countless forms, but for some reason in this particular policy, it only means Muslim terrorism. But it is now, so we're like, it's our problem. We're taking the lead on this one when we absolutely shouldn't have. That was a terrible way to. I get painting the rhetoric of the war that way, but they actually planned to fight the war that way. Like the only reason we went into Iraq, and it's kind of hard to remember at the time, but Iraq was just one of the second of what was to be many stops. Like the Bush administration had like 6 months, like we're going to do Iraq, we'll clean up Iraq 6 months, maybe we'll slide over to Yemen, maybe we'll go down to the African coast for the winter, and then, it was this incredible arrogance, and, America can't ever unfurl itself from military cock-ups like this, at least not quickly.
We also do want to remember that large portions of the rest of the world, particularly the countries we happen to keep invading, don't see this as a war on terrorism. They see it either as a war on them or on an American imperialist war, that basically the United States wants to conquer their territory, take their resources, fill in the blanks. And that's a big problem.
Cases put up a puppet government again.
I wrote a piece, I think it was on Latest quite some time ago. It was kind of my version of Red Dawn, where the Chinese invaded the United States, and it was all about how they kept trying to tell I picked the small town I used to live in, and how they kept telling us they're going to build us schools and roads, and so we should like them, and then there were incidents, and they ran over somebody's donkey with a Chinese tank, and nobody was happy about that. And Americans seemingly are impervious to understanding these things from the other side. When we drone kill children, it's collateral damage. I mean, imagine some terrorists, some guy who calls himself a terrorist guns down a cop in Philadelphia, and we go completely apeshit. We essentially nuke a hospital in Afghanistan, and it's like, oh, we made a mistake, we're sort of sorry. No one in America seems to have the ability to look at these things even slightly from the other side, and that hurts us.
You guys are talking about it like it's an American issue, but one thing I've noticed since, we have the European coalition after 9/11, except, France. But now it seems like, Germany and France and the UK, they all want to go and carpet bomb ISIS. Why aren't we talking more about Europe's role in this, Peter?
Well, because Europe is not playing a large role in it. The United States refuses to issue accurate, complete statistics on how many of these airstrikes are actually conducted by other than American aircraft. Most of the estimates are over 80% of the strikes are by the United States. Obama insisted on referring to the coalition against ISIS as numbering 60 countries in his State of the Union address. The list of those 60 countries still is on the State Department website, and it includes shit like Fiji and places that, signed on because, hey, there might be a few bucks in it for us, but are never involved in these things. The Germans, French, whatever, they often will send a small contingent of special forces out, because, hey, it shuts the Americans up. It's good training for our guys, whatever. But look, anybody who's trying to say that what's going on in Iraq and Syria is anything other than almost entirely an American show, I think is kind of fooling themselves. And even, the French get they have the thing in Paris, so they drop a few bombs, and then they kind of... We saw the same thing with Jordan. If you remember back about a year and a half ago, there was a Jordanian pilot captured by ISIS. He was horribly set fire to in a cage. And the Jordanians went crazy. They did a few airstrikes, and then they and that's the kind of thing that happens. It's largely for show. It gets celebrated in the American media. And then at the end of the day, it's mostly American forces doing the work of the so-called coalition.
Well, you mentioned Jordan. Josh mentioned the King of Jordan earlier, and at the debate, one of the weirder performance moments was Bernie Sanders calling Hussein a hero. Josh, is he a hero?
I'll say this. I get why his people, why Americans love him, because he put on a flight suit and, he's authoritarian, which is kind of weird that, the point is that of Middle Eastern leaders, King Hussein is about as good as we're going to get in terms of someone that shares our values and is willing to go to war with us, which for America, that's like a date. Like, let's do a little few skirmishes, and maybe we'll become allies. The problem with the Middle East is it's bigger than just one leader. The King of Jordan might be great. He might actually suck. I'll be honest. I don't really know much about him beyond that he put on a flight suit and looked like a badass. And he did take in a lot of refugees. He did do that. So
that's the thing. It's not a name that's dropped a lot. Peter, why do you think Bernie called him a hero?
I really didn't get that completely. The best I can come up with is sort of what Josh was saying, is that he seems like he's one of the few leaders that doesn't say terrible things about the United States. He allows us to sort of set up bases and do stuff in his country without a lot of fanfare. He certainly has control over the more radical Muslim elements in his country. He's as close as we get to sort of friends these days. So, but again, why Bernie picked that and focused on that remains a little bit unclear.
Why he did it is because there is no Muslim coalition that will ever happen. But you say King Jordan, or the King of Jordan, and people are like, oh yeah, he had on an army uniform once, maybe. Like, it's a political thing, but King of Jordan, he's going to do exactly what he's doing now for the next president.
Yeah, true.
I like the little narrative that's playing out on Josh's end, how we like the King of Jordan because he's authoritarian. We like Trump because he's authoritarian. The Republicans have this love affair with Putin because he's authoritarian. I can't wait till till November and we have President Trump and Vice President Palin. And with that, I think we should wrap this one up. Thanks for joining us. Keep reading Latest.com. We'll see you next week.